the opening question I have for you is, Obama, when I heard that Obama was running for presidency, you know, I grew up listening to the blues, loving the black culture because it was oppressed. You know, I really was hoping somebody would come along who would understand what oppression is, you know, on a cellular level, on a physical level. Then a friend of mine, you know, showed me a clip on YouTube. You know, Obama was saying support for Israel and Jerusalem as its capital, and that was very shocking, and it kind of took a lot of hope out, you know. Now, I've got friends who would say, well, he needs to say that. He needs to buy into it to be able to get into government. But intentions are good, and he may not be able to do much in the beginning. So what do you have, I mean, is there much hope for the Palestinian people under Obama? That's the question.
It's probably worse than under Bush. There was never any reason for any hope. I mean, Condoleezza Rice was black. In fact, more black than Obama was. She, in fact, came, not only was black, no, he's half black. She was fully from black origin. And furthermore, she came from a slave background, if you trace it back, which Obama didn't. They're both parts of the black elite. So no different than any, maybe some difference, but if he wanted to, he could take quite a different position. He doesn't want to. He's not forced to say these things.
Okay, he's not forced to say these things, but...
I mean, look, George Bush the first, the senior George Bush, he went farther than Obama does. Obama's politely requested the government of Israel to live up to its conditions under the so-called roadmap, which include putting an end to all expansion of settlements, including what they call natural growth, you know, building a new house for your children. That was supposed to stop under the roadmap. George W. Bush repeated that. Obama's repeating that. George Bush Sr. Not only took the same position, but in fact imposed pretty mild sanctions on Israel to the extent that it extended that. So stopped loan guarantees and so on. Obama was asked, was he going to impose any sanctions? And he said no, his request, he said, is purely symbolic. And he will do nothing like what the first George Bush did. Okay. It wouldn't have taken much courage to go as far as George Bush.
Mm-hmm. So,
and in fact, when he said it's purely symbolic, mm-hmm. that's telling Netanyahu, do whatever you want.
Right, of course.
And in fact, now they've gone even further. A few days ago, Hillary Clinton said, look, the issue of settlements shouldn't be a precondition for negotiations. Okay, that's saying we don't impose anything.
Okay, okay. So the idea that the pro-Israeli lobby is too strong, and if he was to stand up, he would be assassinated or be kicked out of office?
That's completely wrong. I mean, look, the Israeli lobby is there. Mm-hmm. It's a pretty powerful lobby. On the other hand, it knows better than to confront U.S. power. Whenever it runs into U.S. power, it quickly flees and runs away. And this happens constantly. So in fact, it's happening just recently, even now. For example, last summer, summer 2008, the most sensitive time politically, right in the middle of a presidential campaign, AIPAC, the Israeli lobby, had a very high priority. They wanted Congress to pass a resolution calling for a blockade of Iran. It's essentially an act of war, which would have been a precursor to allowing Israel to bomb Iran. And they got quite a lot of signatures. It was going through Congress. All of a sudden it stopped and was withdrawn. Well, we don't know the details, but what presumably happened is that the Bush administration simply told them, we don't want a war with Iran now. So they called it off. That happens repeatedly.
On a personal level, I'm baffled. Why wouldn't Obama want to do something? Isn't it easy to...
Very simple. simply compare what Israel offers the United States with what the Palestinians offer the United States. The Palestinians offer nothing. They are weak, powerless, have no friends. Accordingly, they have no rights by the most elementary principles of statesmanship.
So what is it offering?
Israel offers a lot. It's a rich first world country in substantial measure thanks to U.S. gifts, but it's there. It's a very powerful military state. It's essentially an offshore base for the United States. The U.S. even pre-positions weapons there. Right on the fringe of perhaps the most important area of the world, the energy-producing regions. It has very close intelligence contacts with the United States. High-tech, it's a highly unequal society, rather like the United States, but it has an educated, westernized, in fact, Western sector with high educational level, a lot of technical skills, good scientific work, very closely integrated with the U.S. high-tech industry. I mean, U.S. high-tech industry invests substantially in Israel, and it's increasing. Just take one example. Intel, the world's major chip producer, is developing what they claim will be the new generation of chips worldwide, much more advanced than current ones. That's all electronic equipment. And they're building the plant in Israel. That makes sense. You know, they have infrastructure, workforce, so on and so forth. The military industry is very closely related. In fact, so much so that some Israeli military industries have relocated their management and marketing headquarters to the United States, where they have more access to federal subsidies, bigger markets, and so on. So it's kind of like an offshore high-tech military base for the United States right on the periphery of the world's most strategically important region. And that offers a lot.
Okay. But now on the question of hope, what can people do?
Quite a lot.
Okay.
Take the question of being attacked. Up until about 10 or 15 years ago, if I gave talks on these, 30 years ago, you couldn't give talks on these issues. I mean, nobody wanted to listen. Over the years, there became more interest and more concern and commitment. Up till about maybe 10 years ago, I used to have police protection if I'd give a talk at a university. That's completely gone. In fact, now you can't even get a hostile question.
You can even get a what?
A hostile question.
Okay.
You have to kind of encourage support. People who support Israeli policies to, have the courage to stand up despite the hostile audience. Well, that's an enormous change in public opinion, especially among younger people, including younger Jews, incidentally. Now, public opinion happens to be in favor of the international consensus on a political settlement that the United States has barred for 30 years. Well, that can be organized, can become active, and it can compel a change in U.S. policy. It's very common to blame Israel for what's happening.
Right.
So Israel attacked the Gaza Strip. Israel's preventing water from reaching Arab communities. We should boycott Israel and so on. That's a gift to the United States. It's exactly what the United States government wants to hear. Israel can go exactly as far as Washington permits it to. If Washington puts in limits, that's it. Israel can't go beyond that limits. So all of these are U.S.-Israeli policies. The bombing of Gaza was a U.S.-Israeli attack. The U.S. government blocked efforts at the United Nations to have a ceasefire. Israel was using U.S. weapons, F-16s, helicopters. It's all from the United States. It's a gift from the United States to permit them to do what they're doing. Take Obama. During the Gaza attack, he was asked he's the incoming president. He said, I can't say anything. There's only one president. I mean, which is totally ridiculous. He was talking about every other topic, but here he couldn't say anything. In fact, the only thing he could say is, if my daughters were being attacked by rockets, I'd do anything I could to protect them. He was talking about Israeli children, not Palestinian children. Yeah. Okay. Israel carefully timed the attack so that it ended hours before the inauguration. That's coordinated with the United States almost certainly, so that Obama wouldn't have to say anything about it. And then he could go on and talk about hope and change and let's look forward and forget what's behind and so on. You know, this is all telling Israel, just go ahead and destroy as much as you want.
And you think the American public, if they got together, they can make a change?
Of course. I mean, they've done it endless numbers of times. I mean, it's slow. I mean, take, say, the Vietnam War. I mean, the Vietnam War began in 1962. It's when Kennedy attacked South Vietnam. You couldn't get 3 people in a room to talk about it. You were denounced, you know, physically attacked. I mean, my wife in 1964, we had 2 little girls, took the kids to a women's demonstration, women and children. The demonstration was just basically standing. And this was in Concord, Massachusetts, the center of U.S. pacifism. They were physically attacked, women and children. That's 1964. Okay, it developed. It's already 2 years after the war. You know, still couldn't talk about it. By 1967 or 67, protest was so enormous that when President Johnson, wanted to send more troops, the Joint Chiefs of Staff objected. They said, we're going to need those troops for civil disorder control in the United States. Country's blowing up. Okay, so they entered into negotiations, and you know, what happened later is hideous, but gradually through. Yeah, things happen. In fact, in the last 40 years, the country's become a lot more civilized. The world has, the Western world. Women's rights, minority rights, environmental concerns, opposition to aggression, solidarity movements. Take, say, Palestine. I mean, there's very impressive nonviolent resistance proceeding in Palestine. Actually, it's reported here. It's barely reported in the United States. And international solidarity workers take part in it, like Myriad McGuire, for example, who was attacked with, hit by a bullet, what they call a rubber bullet or something. Okay, these are big changes. And if they proceed, the United States, which is the center of it, can be compelled to change policy. Europe can do a lot. I mean, Europe prefers to toddle along obediently and not raise its head, follow the master. It doesn't have to.